What's up, vetters? Patrick here with Vetted. Today, we're talking about this.
Is still out on just how fast and how far the bombshell Age of Disclosure documentary moves the needle on UFO disclosure. But according to a new report, we may be closer than you think. Journalist Michael Shellenberger published an article today quoting a senior advisor to Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, who says, quote, "We are headed toward a massive disclosure."
There's a show that's come out, it's called The Age of Disclosure.
Yeah.
Okay, I know everyone probably, right? Everyone asked you about it?
Sure. It was an interview that was done almost like maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was in the Senate.
Right.
So it wasn't recent. So I was describing what people had said to me, not things that I have firsthand knowledge of in that regard. A little bit of selective editing, but it's okay because, you know, you're trying to sell a show there.
All right, vetters, please hit that like button. That really helps out the videos. And today I deserve it because I worked really hard on today's video, y'all, as you'll see. And please, if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button, y'all. All right, vetters, so what is this video about today? Well, it's effing bonkers because as I started to go through this video, the spider web just got bigger. We've got a lot to cover, so let's just jump right into this. But essentially, what has happened is Marco Rubio just came out in a bombshell interview on Fox News, basically throwing shade at the Age of Disclosure and how they kind of, misused and, deceptively edited his interview that he filmed years ago into this new movie. And then today, I'm going to show you how they're doing it in interviews too, because I'm going to be showing a lot of clips of Dan Farah on Joe Rogan and all the times he mentioned Rubio. Again, touting him as the one. I mean, check out how many times Dan Farah mentions Rubio on Joe Rogan.
Rubio, Rubio.
Yeah, okay, we've got a lot to cover. And not just that, but recently, Michael Shellenberger, more on him later in this video, he came out with a report basically saying that, Trump's going to be coming out soon to say something.
Is still out on just how fast and how far the bombshell Age of Disclosure documentary moves the needle on UFO disclosure. But according to a new report, we may be closer than you think. Journalist Michael Shellenberger published an article today quoting a senior advisor to Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, who says, quote, "We are headed toward a massive disclosure." Now, just when that might happen, it remains vague, but it does reflect the sentiment of the moment.
When that might happen remains vague. Massive disclosure. Yeah. Now you know why I use the words bombshell so much, y'all. I use it ironically, right? It's just, it's my way of, throwing shade back at the community and what people come out and say in this community. The ridiculousness of it all, right? The people are constantly coming out, disclosures coming soon, coming soon, coming. That's why I use it. It's ironically, well, for a couple of other reasons that I can't really get into right now, but that's a big one. But that's neither here nor there. And to be honest, I kind of like using bombshell at this point. But yeah, that's really the reason, because of things like this. All right, so let's keep going.
Rubio was by far the most senior official who went on the record, on camera, demanding answers. And the documentary wasn't the first time that he's voiced his concern about this.
Some of these people still work in the government. And frankly, a lot of them are very fearful of their jobs, fearful of their clearances, fearful of their career. And some, frankly, are fearful of harm coming to them.
And again, Rubio has even addressed these comments. Again, he's repeating back what people told him. Don't worry, we're going to get to that Fox News interview so you can hear Rubio's own words. But let's continue with this just to lay a little bit of a foundation.
It is not just government employees who are in the know. Rubio believes the U.S. government has handed over these UFOs, these spacecraft that they have found, to private military contractors. He says those contractors know more about these crafts than the U.S. government. National security risk? Sure sounds like it could be.
Does Rubio really believe that? We'll find out in a moment.
So no less than the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, went on camera in this documentary saying publicly that the U.S. government has recovered alien technology from non-human sources and is currently working to reverse engineer it. That's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be with you, Elizabeth. It's already a historic moment. I mean, we've never had anybody at Rubio's level. And keep in mind, Rubio is also the National Security Advisor. The last time you had the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor as the same person was Henry Kissinger between 1973 and 1975. Rubio is, arguably number 3, although the State Department is number 1 in foreign policy after the president. Elizabeth, I think what this all means is that the president needs to address this issue. He needs to speak directly to the American people and explain what's going on here. There is conflicting messages.
You see, this is kind of what's happening, as I'm going to prove in this video, is that they're using Rubio's position now as if he had that position when he said those things. And if he still believes those things. Again, wait till you hear the stuff Dan Farah said on Joe Rogan, that in retrospect, after hearing out of Rubio's own mouth, this is crazy, right? So let's continue.
You have the president himself, the vice president, the director of national intelligence, the Secretary of State going further than any of them, and agreeing to even participate in this movie.
Yeah.
Is itself a major statement. So I think, look, there's conflicting messages. The president, I think, needs finally to address this issue.
I mean, the conflicting messages part from Schellenberger, I agree with, right? But again, they keep mentioning Secretary of State Rubio interviewed in the age of disclosure. He wasn't Secretary of State yet, right? Or the National Security Advisor. But more on that. One more from this interview.
Yeah, look, I think they have to find a way to explain, at least a large percentage of it. I think everybody in the country, almost everybody in the country, would understand if there's certain information by the way it was collected or related to weapons programs that we would expect and want our government to keep secret. But if it's a government, by and for the people, and our Constitution is in effect, then we need to know what's going on here. And the amount of everybody agrees there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation. There's not agreement on which is which. It ultimately, it's arrived at this moment that it's just got to be up to the president of the United States to finally address this issue. I think he will be asked about it in the days and weeks to come. And I think I think we saw in the Epstein files, people are not going to let go of this. They really want answers, because I think at a certain point, the speculation is boring when we know that our leaders actually do know what's going on and have not yet shared that information with us.
And when you had the Secretary of State confirming that there's something going on, or at least saying that there's something going on, yeah.
Yeah, Elizabeth Vargas, I hear you, right. And again, I agree with Schellenberger when he says there's conflicting statements. Yeah, there is, right? And Schellenberger did respond to all of this. I've got a clip of that at the very end, because as I was making this video, he responded. So make sure to stay tuned to the very end for his statement on all of this. Now, let's move to Marco Rubio's bombshell interview on Fox News, because this interview right here has created, honestly, so much drama, trauma, everybody's talking about this in the UFO community, because everyone had propped up Rubio, right, as the biggest voice, honestly, from the age of disclosure. And now, listen to what he says here.
I want to start this out with a fun question, because there are really serious issues involving national security, peace around the globe. I mean, you're at the highest level of discussions. And we're going to get into a lot of the hot spots and success and all that. But I've got to ask you, there's a show that's come out. It's called The Age of Disclosure. Yeah. Okay, I know everyone probably, right? Everyone asks you about it? Sure. It's a new documentary. We had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities. It's not ours. And presidents operate on a need-to-know basis. Yeah. Okay, that is...
So a couple points on it. First of all, I'm not disavowing that. It was an interview that was done almost maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was in the Senate.
Right.
So it wasn't recent. The second point I would make, I was describing the allegations that people have come forward with. I have people that came forward to us. You know, some of these people were Navy pilots, admirals, generals, whatever, that would come forward and say, that there were programs in the U.S. government that not even presidents were made aware of. So I was describing what people had said to me, not things that I have firsthand knowledge of in that regard. A little bit of selective editing, but it's okay because, you know, you're trying to sell a show there. But the fundamental comments, I haven't seen it, but the clips I've seen and people have shown me are fundamentally true, and that is there are things, we know this has been documented, there have been things that fly over the airspace, restricted airspace, be it where we're conducting military exercises or the like, and everyone in the government says they're not ours. And so what I worry most about, just me personally, is that some adversary, another country, for example, has developed some asymmetric capability for surveillance or the like that we just are not prepared for. You know, we're looking for missiles and fighter jets, and they're coming at us with drones and balloons. Yeah. I remember, you know, when NORAD turned on the radars and started looking for balloons, all of a sudden they spotted a bunch of balloons flying overhead. 90% of them were innocent, you know, things. A couple of them were Chinese. And so, but we never look for balloons because our radars aren't trained for that. So that really was the point I was trying to drive at. I can't comment on the rest of the documentary. It has, as I said, claims from people that were former admirals, naval fighters, people with high clearances in government. Some of them are pretty spectacular claims. I'm not calling these people liars. I don't have independent knowledge that what they're saying is true. The one observation I had is we had people that did very important jobs in the U.S. government who are saying these things. So we have people with very high jobs in the U.S. government that are either A, liars, B, crazy, or C, telling the truth. And two of those three options are not good.
But
I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I don't have any point of, you know, I don't want to call them liars. I just don't have any independent way to verify everything they said.
I mean, Hannity starts it off with, you know, let me ask you a fun question, right? Again, people think, oh, they're taking it so seriously. They're not really. I mean, they are, but they're not, right? This is a 20-minute interview with Rubio on Sean Hannity's show, Fox News. They talk about it for the first 2 minutes, and then they really get into the stuff, right? So they just get that out of the way and then move on.
Here's the problem with vetting people. You can't have a perfect vet no matter who that person is for a couple reasons. The first is you can only vet information that exists, right? So it is possible that in many cases, there are things about these people you just don't know, no matter how much you vet them. The second thing you can't vet, you can vet what people have done in the past. You can't bet what people might do in the future.
And Rubio is clearly stating here that they selectively edited his stuff, but he gets it. It's just, you know, it's to make money on a movie. That's what he thinks, right? He thinks what he said was taken out of context, and he was just repeating what other people had told him. Doesn't really believe this stuff. Although he agrees there are things flying around what we don't know that we need to find out. But in no way is he saying all the things that people are saying he said. Even if he said it, he's sort of regurgitating what other people had told him, but then they cut that part out and only used, right, his term. Instead, if I said, my friend said, and then I quoted, and then you just cut that and you took out the my friend said part, you'd think I said it, right? And that's what's happening here. And this is kind of bonkers, to be honest with you. I don't know how Age of Disclosure recovers from this. I'm assuming everyone's going to jump down Rubio's throat now. He was their hero, and now he'll be the enemy. What do you mean doesn't know? What do you mean this? What do you mean that? What do you know, it's not looking good, because there's been a lot of problems with the Age of Disclosure and how it's been taken, right? Essentially, because Rubio's not the only one to come out and say, this was selectively edited. I recently did a video about George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell and their latest weaponized episode. That video's gone viral for VETTED, right? It's almost at 200,000 views. But here's a compilation that I played at the very beginning of that video. Okay, I'm going to put a link down below. Go check out the full video. It's well worth it. But listen to what Jeremy and George said about the Age of Disclosure.
Now, of course, I've got some bones to pick with the movie on factual reality.
James Clapper is no friend of UFO research. When OSAP was trying to become a special access program, what's not been made public is he fought tooth and nail to kill it. Dave would have been a valuable addition to the movie. Why do you suppose he wasn't in it?
I do think that he has a difference of opinion. He really thinks everybody should just open up and say what they know. For example, He thinks that if Lou Elizondo was part of the legacy UFO program, that he should just say it. Go out on the limb and just say it. Yeah, I'm just going to say it, man. It didn't seem like it was lost in translation. It seemed like they wanted you to believe that that AATIP, was correct, and the New York Times had received the $22 million that funded this whole study, and it just and it ran for that long, and that's just not true.
And I was glad to see Lou Elizondo and Jay Stratton on the same stage, even if they weren't being entirely truthful. But if you're making a movie and you're calling for disclosure and honesty, and we want to know the truth, tell us the truth. We can handle the truth. We want transparency. You got to live up to that standard too.
Yeah. All right. There's a lot of problems here with Age of Disclosure. How many other people did they selectively edit, right? How come all of these people from the Age of Disclosure who were in it, besides your top UFO personalities, haven't come out to back this stuff up? Do other people feel like Rubio? It's not like Rubio put out a press release, right? Because it's just a movie to him. It's just to make money, right? So he'll respond when he gets asked. But how many people will see that interview and know that? I mean, talk about putting a stick in the wheel spokes here on this, right? Like, honestly, and some of the things that Rubio said, I said in my interview, and we'll get into that more a little bit later. It says, I knew his stuff had been misconstrued. I included some of this in my review of the Age of Disclosure. And look, let's take a look at what Rubio is actually talking to Trump about.
I do want to say this is the most wonderful and magical time of the year. By that, of course, I'm referring to the college football playoffs. And I just want to say this as a point of personal privilege. And I'm a Florida Gator, but if the University of Miami gets screwed out of the college football playoffs after going 10-2 and beating Notre Dame, the whole thing should be scrapped, and you're going to have to take over it next year.
This is from a recent press conference, okay? This is the kind of stuff they're talking about. They're not talking about UFOs like everyone's making them out to be, right? That they care about this so much, and it's happening. The massive disclosure is coming, right? And mind you, that comes from an advisor to Rubio saying that. And then Rubio comes out and says that. But more on that advisor later, because what I uncovered, you're not going to believe. But stay tuned for that. That's coming later. Now, let's move on to this interview with Dan Farah. And like I showed you, he brought up Rubio more than anybody in his Joe Rogan interview. And every interview he goes on, Rubio is the guy. I mean, Rubio's saying it, Rubio's saying it, Rubio's saying it, Rubio, right? Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, second most powerful person in the world. No joke, Dan Farah said that. And then Rubio comes out and undercuts it. It's basically like when you were in school and you're like, maybe you lie to your friends and say, yeah, I'm talking to this girl, we're going to be going out. And then people talk to the girl and like, I sent him one message, like I said hi to him in the hallway. You know what I mean? It's like, this is basically what's happening. Huh? Well, sounds like that's not what he thinks at all, right? Maybe his chin was buckling for other reasons. Who knows? Again, it's just so bonkers, right? And again, this part that Dan Farah keeps mentioning, that Rubio's saying we're in a secret race, arms race to reverse engineer alien tech, non-human tech. That's not true. That's not what Rubio thinks at all. And his stuff has absolutely been taken out of context. He's saying other people said that, but he has no way to verify it. Again, what I've been saying since the beginning about this, where's the proof? Age of Disclosure had a ton of claims, zero proof. And now people are going to be coming out of the woodworks to be like, this is all wrong. I didn't say that, or that's not what I meant, or you edited it selectively, Again, let's continue. Again, it's just all been taken out of context. But again, I'm going to show you every single time that Dan Farah brought up on Joe Rogan Rubio as the platform to stand on. And now that platform's gone, right? Everyone's using Rubio as the guy that he's in the Age of Disclosure, Secretary of State. Oh my God. I mean, again, This is a clip from Rubio from Age of Disclosure that Age of Disclosure put on their own YouTube channel. So this is fair use, okay? Small little clip. This is the kind of stuff Rubio is saying.
We've had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities, and it's not ours, and we don't know whose it is. That alone, just that statement alone, deserves inquiry.
And even that's being taken out of context. He literally says, we don't know where it's from. So what do you mean alien tech, non-human tech? He's never said, he's not, what are you talking, like, yes, he thinks something is flying around that we don't know what it is, but that's where he stops. They take it a step further. Yeah, we're in a race to reverse engineer the Rubio. Again, what's said in the film, now that we've learned, he's basically saying, if this was true, this is how it would happen. But again, it's all being misconstrued and packaged completely differently. Just like you saw from Jeremy and George explaining, right, in their weaponized episode, it's like, it's sort of like the ends justify the means. So we believe in this. Let's edit this certain way. Let's send a certain message because this is what we need, right? It's so bonkers. I mean, this totally undercuts the credibility of the film, if you ask me. And now if people are going to start attacking Rubio, which they already are in the UFO community, when 2 seconds ago they were lifting him up and now he's just a big piece of lying shit. It's like, not when he filmed this, right? This is all coming back to bite them in the ass. My question is, how many people will see this part of it, right? The film is out, the message is out. Are people going to realize this? Again, I brought this up in my review, right? The analogy I gave was, if you have a band, your first time playing, and you put out, right, flyers for your band, come see my band, and then you don't rehearse and people show up and you suck, good luck. Was the UFO community ready for people to come in and investigate this? No. Now look, we weren't ready. We weren't ready for this. The UFO community is not ready for the scrutiny. And what's going to happen is they blame everyone else in the community. It's everyone else's fault, except the people making claims with no proof. Why don't we turn towards them? I keep saying that, right? It's like, I'm like a broken record here, y'all. If this is true, Rubio is talking in like theory, right? He doesn't know what any of these countries have. And he does bring up a point about strategic surprise, but again, not in the way that Dan Farah sells it and not in the way that he edited it in the film. And remember when I said I caught it? Yeah, I caught this initially when this happened. I knew that when I saw the interview with Dan Farah and I saw the Age of Disclosure, that that's not what Rubio was saying. If you listened closely, this is what I said in a recent video that I made. I'm going to put a link down below. It's my review of the Age of Disclosure. And I covered this. I already said it. So there's something that Dan Farah said, you know, right after, you know, talking about Marco Rubio. And I remember this part in the film where Marco Rubio's like, you know, strategic surprise, right? We didn't think Japan could bomb Pearl Harbor. We didn't think this about another country, this, that, the other. Okay. And then they say, well, it's not China. It's not Russia. Okay, but you just said we thought that before and we were wrong many times. So it literally could be them. Again, another contradiction. In fact, Rubio's openly saying it could be China and it could be Russia. Yeah, you see, he's just talking about in general, right? And in fact, he thinks it could be China or Russia. And if we don't think it's them with their own technology, we're the ones that are going to be left in the dust. Not aliens, not any of that stuff. We can't be looking to the right when they're coming from the left. It almost feels like that's what they're trying to get us to do. Americans are trying to get us to look like, no, right? We need to be worried about what Russia and China are developing. Forget aliens. That's where the strategic surprise could come from. And all the examples he gave, I mean, it's like right there in your face. The contradiction is right there in your face. Interesting. Because I have a theory, right? Basically saying Rubio helped jumpstart this whole film and got people on board and this, that, and the other. Very interesting. You see, Dan Farah has been selling this, and other people in the film as well. He basically went and sold her, but hey, don't stand on your own and say this. Come together as a power of many, and then you won't feel left out. See, I think that strategy was used against him. Let's get all these people to come out, and then we can use each other, right? It's like they're endorsing each other. Rubio's endorsing Hal Puthoff. Rubio's endorsing Tim Gallaudet. Rubio's endorsing Lou Elizondo, and all these people. Do you see what I'm saying? They actually were doing the opposite, and they tricked everybody. Maybe it was unintentional. Maybe their idea was to do that, but I have a feeling they used it against them, right? It's my opinion. That's my theory, right? It's not what we think. And look, I'm not here to, I'm not here to throw shade at everything and be such a downer and a skeptic and a debunker and a cynic and this. It's like, I just can't avoid the truth, right? I have no feeling. To me, the truth is like fire or water. It has no friend. It has no enemies, right? I can't decide the truth, but I accept whatever the truth is. And in this case, the truth is this totally just, in my opinion, demolishes the age of disclosure, because now you wonder about everything in the film and how it was brought to you in a misleading way. That's the problem with doing the end justify the means, because you build a house on sand in the tide. And the moment that tide comes in, you're screwed, to quote Marco Rubio, right? It's like, that's why you just tell the truth. Be honest. We think this is happening based on this. Instead, they went with absolutes. They misedited. They misinformed. And they propped this up as being a certain thing. They got all these people together to sort of conform, right? And have this powerful testimony from all these over 30 different people, right? But it was the opposite. All these high-level people were used to sort of prop each other up, to add credibility. Not so that they could come out and speak because they were afraid, right? It's all in shambles. Rubio doesn't think that defense contractors have all this stuff. This is what was told to him by these people, right? Again, but don't worry. The last clip that I'm going to show you, again, the spider web that it brought out was just absolutely insane. It's like when you pull a weed out of the ground, you think it's a small little weed, and it's just got this root. You're just like, what the? That's basically what happened. Again, but Rubio's not talking about alien tech here. This is the problem with all the different words they use. This is why they changed the words from UFOs and aliens and extraterrestrials to all these other words: non-human sentience, non-human intelligence, UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, unidentified anomalous. The reason they do all that is to confuse you, right? It's not to, we wanted to remove the stigma. No, you didn't. You just want to confuse people, because this industry thrives in the mystery. It's like sunlight to a plant, right? It's like darkness to a mushroom. It thrives. If the moment light gets shine on it, or the moment, you find out the truth, it all crumbles. So you don't want to know either way. You always want it to be ambiguous, and you always want it to be mysterious, not one way or the other. And when things like this come out and we start to find out more truths, it just all falls apart. Take a look at the last clip that I've been teasing this entire time, because I'm about to unravel a thread. I don't know if you're ready for it. People for you, huh? So who's this guy, John Estridge, who Dan Farah's shouting out? Well, he was an advisor for Marco Rubio. Interesting. Remember when Schellenberger said he also had a Rubio advisor telling him massive disclosure was coming? So I started to think, is that the same guy? It's not, but it could be. So hang on, let me explain. So who is John Estridge? Well, this is him right here. And according to a local article in Ohio where John Estridge is from, he said this about himself. His day job from 2001 to 2018 was with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA, a combat support agency under the Department of Defense. The primary mission of the NGA is collecting, analyzing, and distributing geospatial intelligence in support of national security. It's one of the big 6 intel agencies, Estridge said. Estridge helped in global mapping and satellites, among many jobs, and was deployed to Afghanistan as a civilian. In his current job, Estridge wears several hats. In addition to advising Senators Blunt and Rubio, he helps as a budget monitor and makes 1 or 2 trips a year to Africa while serving on a committee to that nation. He said his position makes him the equivalent of a 2-star general. What? The NGA. Let's start pinning all these things that just got said here. You'll see what I mean. Let's keep going. Now, New York Post reporter Stephen Greenstreet, who personally I'm not a fan of, but the truth is the truth, okay? Because not many people talk about John Estridge, but he put up this tweet a while ago talking about John Estridge. And I dug into some of this, and a lot of it's true. John Estridge is in the acknowledgments section of Lou Elizondo's new UFO book, though Elizondo slightly misspells his name. Estridge will apparently be in James Fox's new UFO documentary, The Program, and is supposedly one of the 40 whistleblowers backing up David Grush's claims of alien space monsters. Estridge previously worked in the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA, and Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the ODNI. In 2018, he became an advisor to the Senate Intelligence Committee, where he prepared senators like Marco Rubio for committee hearings and provided intelligence assessments. He now works for York Space Systems. So, look, I don't like Stephen Greenstreet call him space monsters. It's not. He's a debunker. He's a skeptic. And I'm a skeptic too, but I'm also open-minded about things, right? So, I hate to use his articles, but again, the truth is the truth, and this is just what I could find on John Estridge. And I can go look into all this stuff on my own and sort of back up some of this stuff. But it is interesting that he's claiming that he's one of David Grush's 40 whistleblowers. I found no evidence of that, but it does kind of make sense when you think about the NGA and David Grush's connection to the NGA. Now, I went and checked on John Estridge and his work history from the Greenstreet, right, Twitter post. And it's true. John Estridge does work for York Space Systems. And you may be asking, why is that important? Well, it's very important. Because you see, John Estridge also works for the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And you may be thinking, why is that important? Well, it's very important. Because of this. Remember this guy? Sean Kirkpatrick, head of AARO, former head of AARO? Well, check this out. In December 2023, Kirkpatrick stepped down as the director of AARO. In December 2023, Kirkpatrick joined the Oak Ridge National Laboratory as the Chief Technology Officer for Defense and Intelligence Programs. As further verified here, Pentagon's recently departed UFO chief Sean Kirkpatrick is now working for Oak Ridge National Laboratory, birthplace of the Manhattan Project that helped produce America's first nuclear weapons in the 1940s, he told Laura. Kirkpatrick is supporting ORNL as its chief technology for national security programs. Why is that interesting, Patrick? Well, because so many people, when Kirkpatrick went to Oak Ridge, they were like, oh, he's working for Oak Ridge, he's working for the man, right? He's working for the man. Well, so is John Estridge, and he's advising Rubio, and he's helping with all this stuff. He could be one of David Grush's 40 witnesses, the NGA. This all connects, y'all. It all connects in such a weird way. What the F is going on? This John Estridge guy, who honestly, I think could actually be Schellenberger's source. Even though Schellenberger is selling it as a current advisor, I think it's possible it is John Estridge. But there's more. I'm told by a source that this document by John Estridge at National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA, is the source and or inspiration of the supposed Immaculate Constellation secret UFO program. What? Okay, let's check this thing out. Looks pretty standard, just like a, presentation going through. Okay, yada yada. Course, weapons, system. Wait, what was that? General Clapper. The same General Clapper from the Age of Disclosure? Warfare systems of the future will increasingly depend on the information provided by NGA. NGA must be part of the process and fully engaged from the inception of acquisition programs. Geointelligence cannot be an afterthought. What? I'm going to put a link in the description if you want to go check that out. But is this the inspiration for Immaculate Constellation? And if you're wondering, what is Immaculate Constellation? Remember that same reporter, Michael Schellenberger, we've been talking about? Well, he actually broke the story about Immaculate Constellation. What?
Today's piece is about a new whistleblower who has come forward and has written a report. And this is somebody that is either in government or is a government contractor. I've interviewed this person multiple times in person. I've checked their credentials. They are who they say they are. They have written a report and provided it to members of Congress. And in that report, they claim that that the Pentagon is illegally withholding information from Congress about a secret UAP program. And that secret UAP program is considered a parent program of other programs, but it's called Immaculate Constellation.
And then when you look at where Immaculate Constellation came from, well, we found out. It was Matthew Brown, Jeremy Corbell, and George Knapp covered, right? This is all just what the F is going on. You see, in my opinion, I think this is just the mystery, the ambiguity. That's where it thrives. Like mushrooms in the dark, it thrives. I think that's what happens here. It's just all confused. They're all behind the scenes working together, right? There is no good, bad guys. It's a blurry line. It's a mess. It's gray. It's like, you know, for disclosure, anti-disclosure. That's none of this is happening. This is all just weird. But look, according to John Estridge's employment history, he left being an advisor for Marco Rubio, right, in 2024. And that's when he went to work for York Space Systems as their vice president. He's working with Oak Ridge, right, which is also run by Battelle and the Department of Energy and all that. You know, I mean, come on. Again, you pretend to work for the cause when you're really just working against the cause. And he's behind the scenes throwing stuff out at people, right? Giving them information, giving them access, making sure Rubio gets access, and then making sure Dan Farah gets access to make the age of disclosure, right? And really push people forward. And as Dan Farah said, Rubio coming on board just was the first domino. It got so many other people involved, right? Is this done on purpose? Is that what's happening? Is this just all manipulation, right, by people, and especially John Estridge? I don't know. I'm just throwing out a theory, okay? Just an opinion. We're just talking here, y'all, right? The deeper I get in this well, the further away from the light I get, and it's starting to get a little scary, to be honest. And there's one more thing about John Estridge that I kind of find interesting, if true. You see, these documents leaked online, there was allegedly a text transcript between John Estridge and a defense contractor named Sean Weaver. Well, many people speculated that Sean Weaver was Jake Barber, right? And this has been confirmed nor denied, and I have no idea if these documents are true, but I will say after reading through them, which I'll put a link in the description so you can go read them yourself, I've messaged with Jake Barber, texted with him, and this guy Sean Weaver uses exact wording and phrasing that Jake Barber has used with me. I won't be specific because I want to keep that private, but this could be him. And there's nothing in here that's like crazy bad. Even if Jake Barber came out and said, yeah, that's me, I don't really see the big deal, to be honest. But it is interesting that John is talking to all these people, right? I don't know, especially when you look at parts of this text exchange, you hear things that Dan Farah has repeated on Joe Rogan, such as, we are at a crossroads position whereby members want to partner with industry and find the win-win way forward. You see, Dan Farah has used some of that same wording, especially in that Joe Rogan interview. By members, I mean numerous senators that know what is going on. You see, that's also things that Dan Farah has been parroting, right? And Dan Farah's already admitted that John Estridge immensely helped with the film, right? And what's also interesting is that if John Estridge is one of David Grush's 40 whistleblowers, remember, David Grush isn't in the age of disclosure. And if you go watch my video about Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp and what they covered, they explain that David Grush just has a different opinion about all this and didn't want to be in the film. What? Again, what the F is going on, man? Honestly, I'm as confused as ever about all of this. But one thing I do know, we're not getting the truth. That I'm certain of. And in fact, not only are we not getting the truth, it's not just by accident, it's on purpose. The gatekeepers, that you think are holding this UFO legacy program behind the scenes and covering up all this stuff, I think the real gatekeepers are right in front of our eyes. And they're misdirecting us. Why? I don't know. But that's what I think's happening. And that's a little scary, which is why it's all a mess. So look, I'm going to put links down below to everything. Connect all the dots you want. Think whatever you want. It's up to you. It's your personal journey. Me personally, I think this is all bullshit. I still believe in the phenomena, of course. I think there's something going on. I firmly believe that. I just think these guys are full of shit. And look, Michael Schellenberger did respond to Marco Rubio's comments, right? Which again, have caused an absolute bombshell explosion in the UFO community, and everyone's backtracking. Even him.
Hey everybody, it's Mike Schellenberger for Public. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told Fox News last night that the interview he gave for the new documentary film The Age of Disclosure about unidentified aerial phenomena was 3 or 4 years ago when I was in the Senate, and that I was describing what people had said to me, not things that I have firsthand knowledge of. Rubio described the pretty spectacular claims made by people with high clearances in government and said, "I just don't have any independent way to verify everything they said." And Rubio said the film engaged in a little bit of selective editing, but it's okay because you know you're trying to sell a show there. Rubio also said, however, that I'm not disavowing what he said in the film, and as both Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, Rubio should have ways to either verify or debunk the spectacular claims made in the Age of Disclosure. If Rubio feels he lacks the power to verify the claims in the film, then he should explain why that would be. As National Security Advisor and Secretary of State, Rubio has unparalleled access to Special Access Program briefings, compartmented intelligence, and interagency assessments comprised of top secret and classified information. If Rubio cannot determine whether highly cleared officials are telling the truth or lying, then that raises questions as troubling as the ones around UAPs.
So look, I'll put a link in the description if you want to read the rest of what he put out and the rest of that video. You can watch it for yourself. Because he put an article. He's basically just reading his article in that video. So anyway, all links in the description. Go check it out for yourself. We'll see you guys on the next one.
I am so happy that this movie exists. The ability of this movie to exist, it was well made. A lot of people we know, a lot of people we brought forward, initially on this topic, were shown and featured in such a cool light. It really is a huge endeavor to make a film like that. So I congratulate Dan, I congratulate his whole team. I congratulate, Jay Stratton, everybody, Lou Elizondo, people that participated. Now, of course, I've got some bones to pick with the movie on factual reality.
Let's pick some bones, Jeremy, right? Because there's a lot to discuss about this film. Things I've covered already in my review of the film, but I was very happy to see them point this stuff out as well. It would have been really disingenuous and awkward if they didn't, because I actually used clips from WEAPONIZED of them saying things that contradicted stuff that was in the film, right? Big things. So let's take this one red flag at a time. Let's start with David Grush. Why wasn't David Grush in the Age of Disclosure, right? Huge whistleblower, testified in July 2023, talked about non-human intelligence, right? Bodies, we recovered bodies, all of this.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
Biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human.
And then guess what? He's not in the film. Well, he's in the film, but he's not in the film, right? They use clips of him from his interviews with News Nation and testifying and everything, but he's not interviewed. I always thought that was weird. In fact, I brought that up in my review of The Age of Disclosure. Why is David Grush not in this? Well, guess what? Now we know why.
I'd love to ask you guys, we didn't see Dave Grush in there, but we did hear from Dave Grush, an interview, Jeremy, that you helped set into motion on Fox News. And I'm sure people look at this like it's all being, stage managed, that the movie comes out and then Dave's on this and Fox does a week long of series and Bill Maher does interviews, and it's all being manipulated by some invisible beings or something. But that interview happened a long time ago. Dave would have been a valuable addition to the movie. Why do you suppose he wasn't in it?
Well, I think he definitely chose not to be in it. I remember helping to make that connection with Dan so that they could have that conversation. I think Dave has a kind of different tactic to getting out what he knows to be true. Dave is a true whistleblower. This is not a managed message with Dave. Not that it is with the other guys, but it is at least authorized. With Dave, he really is working on a fundamental attitude that nobody has the right to hold this back. So let's go to his interview for 1 second.
Yeah, so let's talk about this Fox News interview, as Jeremy's about to explain how that all came together, and that's quite relevant. But the idea that David Grush is just thinking different things, right? He has a different viewpoint about this. And how can it be so different that he would be like, I don't want to be in this movie?
Yeah, I helped in just trying to get him in touch with a network and a producer that would be able to hear what he had to say and treat it properly. I mean, we could have done the same, George, but President Trump doesn't watch Weaponized as far as I know. So so David Grush talked again, and I was really glad he decided to, because he's not all over the media. I do think that he has a difference of opinion, and that's for him to talk about when it comes to this stuff. He really thinks everybody should just open up and say what they know. For example, he thinks that if Lou Elizondo was part of the legacy UFO program, that he should just say it. Go out on the limb and just say it. And so I think that's the difference of opinion. I think the film would have had Dave participate if Dave had agreed, but I think that he's just on a different path. Am I explaining that clearly?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, Jeremy, you explained it well, but he's on a different path. So much so that he doesn't want to be in this film. That's this big film for disclosure and all this stuff. Something's not adding up here. And what about it is so different? So in my opinion, it's like he thinks Lou Elizondo was in the legacy program and needs to just come out and say it, but he's not, right? He's not saying any of that. He's dancing around it, which I'm tired of all the dropping clues and breadcrumbs and this. It's like, who's falling for that? A lot of people, but it's absolutely nuts if you really think about it, right? Just say it. Stop dropping breadcrumbs. It seems like you're trying to manipulate by doing that, right? It's like, I can say it and people can think it about me. I'll leave it ambiguous, but that didn't really happen, right? So I think there's a lot more that Dave Grush thinks about this film and where it's going. It just doesn't want to talk about it. And people are being, I just think they know that they knew this film was going to tell a wrong story, right? And not be as transparent as they're claiming to be. And again, we have a lot more to cover about this film of why it's not as transparent as you may think.
Okay. Yeah. So what did he say? What did he say in that Brett Baer interview that was kind of interesting to you guys? Because there's a few key things that I'm not sure if everybody really gets, but now they said it, I'm going to spill the beans too. What'd you hear from Dave?
I think the bombshell for me, at least, is he said that, well, first of all, obviously he said that he had some degree of access to some of the legacy programs. He was reading official intelligence reports, which is completely different than interviewing legacy program witnesses. That's a totally different animal, because he's being officially briefed into those programs by the official government, not speaking to people that were in the program. So I think there's a big distinction there. So that would make him, in my opinion, a first-hand witness. I don't see how anyone could say he's a second-hand witness when he's reading the official U.S. government intelligence reports that are highly classified, giving him information on these classified legacy programs.
Believe it or not, we've recovered the vehicles. And we actually have physical proof, and I was actually partially cleared into some of those activities. It was beyond oral testimony provided to me. I actually had partial access to the data and actually read the intelligence reports resulting from those programs.
Like,
and
with your own eyes,
Correct.
You saw it.
Yes.
And then he said that Brett Baer asked him, like, did you see photos? And he's like, yeah, I saw photos. And in the context of that was, as I could tell, was that he saw photos of the beings from when they were retrieving the craft.
Oh, you got that right. That's been a hard thing to bite a tongue about. You got that right.
Yeah, so he's a first-hand witness. I mean, he saw photographs of the beings. I mean, okay, if you want to say it's a psyop, fine. Then fine. If you want to go that route, then he's a first-hand witness of a psyop. But he's a first-hand witness, period.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. In official capacity, access to the briefings, he didn't say he just read them. They were visual as well. And that was always kind of intimated. If you really look back what David Grush said, you're right. He is a first-hand witness because in official capacity, he saw alien beings. And those are the words that, you know, our government would use. NHI wasn't so hip when these alleged photos were taken, but he saw photos of beings, bro.
And so, okay, now we're confirming that David Grush has seen pictures of alien bodies. Like, what? What are we talking about?
Because it's so outside a normal person's worldview to understand that there is this biological sentience that have piloted these crafts that don't necessarily look 100% like you and I.
Were there pictures? Were there?
There were. Yes, there were.
I mean, kind of doesn't really say that, but that's what Jeremy is saying, right? We can confirm that now. David Grush has seen pictures of alien bodies in an official capacity. But really? Why does he keep calling them non-human? He doesn't know where they're from. He readily admits that in this same interview. So are they aliens? Are they what? They could be humans. If we don't know where they're from, how do we not know they're from Earth and they're not us? Again, you can't have it both ways if you ask me, right? And if you do know and you're not saying it, then David Grush would be guilty of the same thing he would be saying to Luis Elizondo, right? Just come out and say it. Well, Dave, come out and say it, right? And I think maybe people are just running with this a little bit, but I don't know. Has that just been confirmed? David Grush has seen pictures of alien bodies in an official capacity. If that is true, that is huge. But again, this is an interesting point that UFO Joe is going to bring up. He's also on the panel here talking of how, I don't know, how dangerous it is to rely on pictures in this day and age of disclosure.
And so I agree with you. If that is true, then he is a direct first-hand witness to internal government documentation where they call.
So I will play devil's advocate. I agree with what you just said. The problem is, in your interview with Lukaski, he said, and he said it was on April Fool's. He said there were photos that he saw that were going around of a craft from a certain country. It was a UFO that they had at one of their air bases, and he said it was shocking. It wasn't obviously fake. It was identified as fake, but it was a good job. Then you have Kit Green, when he talked to Dolan a few years ago, saying he was shown photos of aliens, and he said, I was convinced they were real, and I later determined, in my opinion, that they were fake. They were a hoax. That was in a Pentagon facility where I had that briefing, and then I had other non-Pentagon facility briefings that videos were sent to me, and I determined all of those were hoaxes. He called it, he had a word for it, active measures. So I'm not saying that happened with David Grush. I'm not saying that's what he saw, but I just want to include that. For me, I want people who actually saw the craft with their own eyes, not a photo. I don't know if you guys, is a photograph going to be enough for the general public if they do release photos of craft and bodies, or are we going to need them to wheel it down, the aisle during a hearing and say, here you go. Here are the people who examined the bodies. Here are the reports. Here's the craft. Here are the people who examined the craft, who worked on it day after day for 5 years. This is why they believe it's a non-human craft. I think eventually that's what we'll need. I don't think in my lifetime we'll see that. I could be wrong. I never thought we'd get to where we are right now. So,
I mean, shout out UFO Joe. And him and I really don't get along on Twitter. He doesn't like VETTED or how I present things or anything. But to be honest, I do think he's a good guy. I've seen the way he takes care of his dog, and that means a lot to me. That shows a lot about somebody, if you ask me. But whatever. He doesn't like VETTED. Not everyone does, and that's okay. But, props to the guy. Brings up a good point, and he actually brings up a lot of good points that I'm going to focus on in this video as well. And I kind of agree. The pictures just aren't going to be enough, and that's weird. And does that really make him a first-hand witness? Right? Yeah, you're a first-hand witness to that you saw pictures, but you're not a first-hand witness to the actual bodies, right? So first-hand witness doesn't mean anything. It loses all value at that point, if that's how we're going to use it, right? It's technically true, but it loses all value. So, okay, let me know what you think down in the comments of why David Grush wasn't involved, and will David Grush come out at a later time and explain a little bit more of these differences? They try to keep this stuff behind the scenes so that people think there's a path forward, right? We're all on the same page, guys. Let's not, people be worried. No, be more honest about the things you disagree with. People will take you more seriously, actually, right? You don't need to have this facade, because when you do that, that's what happens with Age of Disclosure. You try to create this facade. Let's all seem like we're working together, and we don't want to seem like we're falling apart. You know, just be honest. Just be transparent. Now, let's move on to a different part of this interview, and honestly, the Age of Disclosure as well, and that is Dr. Hal Puthoff and Dr. Eric Davis, two scientists who are heavily featured in the Age of Disclosure, especially Hal Puthoff. So is Eric Davis.
I would agree with the other guys about the importance of Hal as a witness in this movie. Hal and Puthoff and Eric Davis have said some of these things in the past. Joe, you will recall, since you probably transcribed it, but they went on Coast to Coast with me back in 2018, 3 or 4 months after the New York Times article came out. And we started asking them about crash retrievals and how many craft we might have. And Hal answered it. And I asked him the question, and there was a really long, it felt like 2.5 months of a pause. And then he spilled something about it. It's great to see him where he's now free and able to describe more of the details. And Eric, of course, if you get him going, he'll tell you everything.
Now, it's interesting what George says about Dr. Eric Davis, especially because if we go back and look at a clip, thanks to UFO researcher Grant Levac, Travis Taylor, who's also featured in the film, and he's also on the Skinwalker Ranch show, right? He was part of the UAPTF with Jay Stratton and all of that, and he's in the documentary. And Grant brought up this clip of Dr. Travis Taylor talking about Dr. Eric Davis in a way that absolutely shocked me.
I will tell you this. Eric has a tendency to accept and believe stories from pseudo-credible, because of where they come from. Then he assumes what they're telling him is a credible story without getting the background data to prove their story. Like if I told Eric that the moon, there were aliens on the moon, Eric would probably believe me, right? And I don't mean that as a discredit to Eric. Eric is he's trustworthy, very, very trustworthy of people that he trusts. So I think what Eric needs to do is find a better way to show proof than simply the story.
I mean, so what? What are we saying here? It's like, what a underhanded compliment from Travis Taylor, right? Like, he's a great guy. He just believes every fucking thing he's told. What the hell, And this idea that that's basically how Dr. Eric Davis gets his information. People he trusts tell him things and he just runs with it. No proof or evidence. And as a scientist, shouldn't he want some evidence and proof? Especially for outlandish claims. I mean, if I ask you, hey, what'd you have for dinner last night? And you're like, steak and eggs. I'm not going to question it whether it's true or not, because it doesn't matter. If you're going to lie about that, who gives a crap, right? I'm going to believe you. But if you tell me you saw an alien or there's an alien in your basement or something, hello, that's a crazy claim. That's why the whole extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That's why that exists, is for that reason. And people like Dr. Eric Davis. And is all the stuff he's telling just things Hal Puthoff told him or other people, right? Because they knew he'll believe it and he'll go tell people, right? He's very trustworthy. Now, he trusts the people he trusts, according to Travis Taylor. Now, we would have to also trust that Travis Taylor is saying the right thing about Dr. Eric Davis, right? Maybe that's not true at all. Maybe Dr. Eric Davis does get evidence or proof, right? Just to give the benefit of the doubt here. I just think it's a very interesting thing for Travis Taylor to say. And again, he's also featured in the Age of Disclosure. And look, the way that Dr. Hal Puthoff and Dr. Eric Davis were featured in the Age of Disclosure might just shock you. Okay, so shout out to Clint Weldon from Night Shift Podcast for sharing that picture with me. How hilarious would it be to see that whole documentary, but they're Muppets, right? Or some people might say puppets. on a string. Another point from Dr. Hal Puthoff that I found to be interesting is something Dan Farrer brought up as well, right? That the whole reason that they were able to do this documentary is because, well, it's the power of many, right? Individually, a lot of these people may not want to say the things that they said, but hey, if you're in a film with other people saying things similar, I'll do it, right? Let's do it. Well, I'll do it together, right? Because Hal Puthoff's like, I wouldn't do podcasts and stuff alone, but you know, hey, we'll get all together. Very insightful, Dan.
I gotta say also that Dan is absolutely brilliant in doing what he did, because I would never go out on a podcast by myself to talk about something what I know. Many of the others here would fall in the same boat. So when he got the idea of saying, look, suppose we get all 34 of you to come out at once, arm in arm. When could you do it? And the answer was yes, I can do it. And that's brilliant insight. Thank you.
And that video was taken at the New York City screening just recently, where they showed the film. I just think it's like Hal Puthoff. It's like nobody thought of this before. This doesn't make any sense. And Hal Puthoff has done plenty of interviews, so I don't know what he's talking about. He said all kinds of things. Again, what are we talking about here? None of this adds up, and something just smells off. I don't know what exactly, but something is just off. Now, let's move on to something that I found to be quite an important point. Something that I mentioned in my video of the review of the Age of Disclosure, but something that UFO Joe here is going to bring up, a great point that I absolutely agree with. Take a listen, and then I'll explain.
If people are new to this and they go, oh, this is really interesting, I'm going to start digging deeper, and then they discover skinwalkers at the Pentagon and they discover OSAP, they're going to say, this movie isn't accurate. And I think, Danny, you brought it up, something we know about. We know this isn't accurate. What else do we not know about that they're talking about is also not accurate? So it's going to, it's going to put that out there. And we want transparency and truthfulness. And I understand not wanting to go there because it gets really messy with orbs and, the biological effects and what Jay Stratton and his family experienced. I get that, but you could have mentioned OSAP, the paranormal connection, and said, we're going to we'll address it in another movie. And I know Farah has said that in interviews, he mentions OSAP, but for the movie, it may create a credibility problem, which we definitely do not need.
Yeah, exactly. And the point that I made in my video is, if you're going to invite everyone to see your show, let's say you're a band, hey guys, come out and see my show, and you don't rehearse and you suck, guess what? Nobody's coming back to see you, right? So if we open the doors to the UFO community and say, come on in, guys, this is all happening. And then people come in and go, wait, this doesn't add up. That doesn't add up. This doesn't add up, right? Screw this, right? What else are they lying about, right? If you say at your party that Snoop Dogg is going to play, and then people show up and it's, Snoop Dogg with 3 G's and some other dude, you're going to be like, what the hell? It's like you're screwing yourself. So it works on the front end to get people excited, but then when they come in, they go, wait a second, this is all bullshit. Or what else are they lying about? That's the whole point. It's like a thread you start pulling. Like, is the UFO community ready for, quote, non-believers to come into it and start asking questions and looking at all the evidence? Is it?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, man, it didn't seem like it was lost in translation. It seemed like they wanted you to believe that AATIP, was correct, and the New York Times had received the $22 million that funded this whole study, and it just and it ran for that long, and that's just not true. And that's, I think that's okay in some ways. Like, I'm looking big picture, but George, I wanted to know what you think, because you reported on all this from the embryonic stage.
And this point about OSAP and AATIP is absolutely the point that I also brought up in my video, right? I actually showed a clip from Weaponized episode 1 of George Knapp and Jeremy talking about this, right? And well, George is really going to lay it down in a way that, much respect to George Knapp for saying this, because everything he says here, I agree with.
Well, again, I don't want to be a turd in the punch bowl or rain on the parade of the movie, because it's a great movie and it is important. But that is a pretty glaring omission. And I was glad to see Lou Elizondo and Jay Stratton on the same stage, even if they weren't being entirely truthful. But if you're making a movie and you're calling for disclosure and honesty, and we want to know the truth, tell us the truth, we can handle the truth, we want transparency, you got to live up to that standard too. And OSAP got the $22 million. That's the money that Reed got for it. AATIP came later. It grew out of it. It did not have a budget that we know of. Lou Elizondo and Jay Stratton were involved in it, but they have had very vigorous, I'll put it that way, vigorous disagreements about what program did what and who was in charge of what, that they have expressed for a number of years. The fact that they've come together and found some common ground that both are able to agree on for purposes of the movie is probably a good thing. Having the movie out without a bunch of internal squabbles is good. But eventually, Jay's going to have his book come out. I think it's still wrapped up in the DOPSR process. And I don't think it's going to toe to the line of the sequence of events that we heard in the movie. I just don't. And because they aren't. And the people who were involved directly with OSAP, who are here in Las Vegas, are not likely to come forward and raise a stink about it. They're just not. But I can tell you, they watched this and they were pretty upset about it.
Okay, so we've done right for your friends that actually ran OSAP and did all that work. It's got to feel like they were a little bit robbed, not having that told, that part of the story.
Yeah, Jay Stratton. Why are they lying about this, right? Because Jay Stratton came into the fold later on to start the UAPTF task force, right? AATIP, OSAP, none of that it's all messed up. In the video they just sent, in the movie they just sent home the message as AATIP. They got the money invested, just like the New York Times article, but they've been saying this is all wrong, right? But I think they try to keep a unified front to sort of sell the message. Well, this does push disclosure forward and does get the conversation going, so let's just let it go. No, again, it's not going to work. Everyone has to be transparent. Just like George said, you can't call for transparency and then not be transparent. We've got to call this stuff out or it makes no sense. And I think that was the whole point. Well, let's send home the message that Lou Elizondo ran AATIP and all this, because otherwise who wants to listen to him if he didn't run this secret UFO program, right? It's just kind of crazy to me. Because Jay Stratton is still out there talking about this stuff, again, on Fox News.
The best way I can say, Sean, is it's not from here. I spent 20 years researching this topic, working this topic directly on behalf of the American people. And I did everything I could and did confirm that some of the things that they're seeing are obviously, completely terrestrial, whatever word you want to use there, from potential adversary nations, from defense contractors and companies here, commercial sources. However, there were still cases that we could not attribute to any nation on earth, and that says a lot.
By the way, they held that David Grush interview for 3 months. That happened in September, and they released it with the Age of Disclosure release, right? Kind of making it seem like David Grush is enforcing it, and then they got everyone else going on Fox News, making it just seem like it's this unified front. That's not really true, right? And Jay Stratton is so much more involved than people are thinking, as Jeremy Corbell's going to bring up. But I have an even bigger point to bring up after that.
But let's maybe it's not like that it's a matter of truth. Maybe it's just a selective telling of a part of history. I think it's a nicer way to say it, because I think it is true. For example, another thing in the movie is when they say it was Jay Stratton he has been so straightforward about this, and I really respect the way he talks about it. But I think he was dancing around something. He says, we bumped into the legacy program. I'm sorry. I'm not buying that for 1 second. I don't think he bumped into it. I think that Jay Stratton, had direct knowledge of the legacy program. I think Lou Elizondo probably has a large history with the UFO thing that is not public yet.
Yeah, so this is kind of crazy, right? Like, Jeremy thinks Jay Stratton was in the legacy program, and Lou Elizondo. And even David Grush thinks that. And I think that's part of what David Grush has a problem with. And Jeremy's just being a little more diplomatic about it, which I understand. They don't want to be dicks to people they may consider friends. Totally get it. but I'm not any of these guys' friends. So I'll say it. It's bullshit, right? And when you hear, you know, for instance, people ask, why isn't Jay Stratton testified, right? It's heavily featured in this film. I made a video about this a few months ago for the September hearings that happened, right? Why isn't Jay Stratton testifying? Because Eric Burleson got asked about it because he's been working with David Grush. Hey, why isn't Jay Stratton testifying? And the answer that Eric Burleson gave, Representative Eric Burleson, who ran the hearing, you know, showed the Hellfire missile, all that, heavily involved in UFOs. When you hear the answer, and especially what Dave advised him on, I was shocked. So check out a clip from this video that I made from a few months ago. I'm going to put a link in the description so you can watch the full video. But this is going to piss you off. What's up, Vetters? Patrick here with Vetted. I saw this tweet last night. Does anyone else find it confusing and concerning that Jay Stratton is going on skinwalker cruises instead of skiffs and congressional hearings, and that Representative Burleson said Grush told him he's not a person of interest for UAP information? Yes, Astral. Wait till you see my video about this tomorrow. I've been thinking the same thing. Well, tomorrow is today. And today, we look into Jay Stratton and why I'm going to convince you he should absolutely be testifying in the UFO hearing. It's an outrage while he's not, because by the end of this video, you're probably going to be irate of why he's not even being considered. So let me convince you why Jay Stratton is so important to testify. Now, this is Jay Stratton here, right? As you can see, he's also known as John F. Stratton. So he might be referred to that somewhere in this video. But before we get going any further, let's cover the viral clip of Eric Burleson talking about Jay Stratton, which prompted Astral's entire tweet and me making this video entirely, because up to this point, I'm thinking, yeah, they're working with Jay Stratton. They're going to be having him testify. Like, absolutely. And then Representative Eric Burleson says this.
Hey, Eric, how's it going, man? I had a couple, just two questions for you, really. Have you and the task force, have y'all spoken to Jay Stratton at all since it was put together?
No, we have not.
Have y'all, like, wanted to look into, since he's, like, Lou's boss and everything, have y'all
at least
inquired about it?
Is there a reason why you haven't specifically looked at Jay Stratton? Has he just not come across your desk, or have you been, is there any, like, mention of him at all?
Yes. I mean, his name has come up multiple times. It's not one of the ones that Grush seems to see as a high profile or somebody that is a priority.
Not a priority. What? Again, I'm going to convince you in this video why he is absolutely a priority. Yeah. So he's just not really worth, you know, testifying. Wait, what? In that video, I explained that, you know, Jay Stratton is put at the top of, like, he's the, you know, this guy is the highest rated official or whatever to come out and talk about UFOs. He's this, he's that, he's heavily featured in Age of Disclosure, all this stuff. And then we don't need to have him testify? What are we talking about? This makes no sense. So I highly recommend checking out that video, because that point is bonkers, right? Especially if people are thinking, oh, he's actually in the UFO legacy program. Which begs the question, is the best way to hide in plain sight? The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist, right? What if Jay Stratton, and this is just my opinion, is part of this gatekeeping legacy program, and in order to seem like he's helping the movement, he jumps in, right? So if he feels like he's part of the problem, then you secretly become part of the solution, but not really, right? A wolf in sheep's clothing. And people say, oh, he's working for the cause. He's not part of the cause. He's working for the cause. Right? It's the best place to hide. And that may be happening. Because again, why wouldn't they want him testifying? Now, this next point that gets brought up about James Clapper is quite interesting, because James Clapper allegedly threw down a big bombshell in the movie. At least that's according to everyone that saw it. I saw it too, but I don't know. I mean, I guess. It's like, there's no evidence provided, so I don't really know what value to give it.
I was really interested in Jim Clapper talking about a UFO program studying UAP entering training ranges such as Area 51, maybe other training ranges. And my question is, like, what's actionable with that? How can you have the former director of national intelligence and the former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, he had a long Air Force career. I mean, he's as mainstream and as credible as you get. How can he get on this documentary, say there's a UFO program funded by taxpayer dollars, and yet Arrow, just as an example, our UFO program in the Pentagon's put up by Congress, is saying there's nothing to see here. There's no evidence of extraterrestrials, as they like to put it, because they don't want to say non-human intelligence. And yet James Clapper is telling us, wait a minute, no, there's a UFO program. Well, okay, well, if there's nothing to see here, then why is there a UFO program? Is it still going on?
So they're talking about a UFO program run in the 90s by the Air Force, Area 51, all this stuff. People were like, oh my God, James Clapper is saying it, right? I mean, even Jeremy really sends home the message here.
It's a big deal. So we had Clapper not only say there's a UFO program, he was not talking about OSAP or AATIP or any of that, or even Kona Blue. He was talking about an Air Force study, an Air Force UFO tracking program. Now remember, last Air Force program we're supposed to have is Project Blue Book. That's kind of an atom bomb, because what, Arrow didn't find that? Didn't reveal that to the public? Huh, weird. Maybe they should have called James Clapper. So that's pretty crazy to begin with.
And look, I will admit, this next clip I'm going to show you is also very weird.
The Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, calls me, Mike, I need you to go through all of it. I need the team to go through all of NSA's holding all of its files, and I need everything that you have on UFOs. And I'm like, what, sir? You want me to do a review of our databases on UFOs? And I'm literally thinking to myself, is this some kind of joke? But clearly it's not, which is reflected in the question. For a lot of people, this is, hey, what is going on out there? Look, clearly there are phenomena occurring out there that both are visible and that we can't explain. I don't know what causes them. I don't know what they are. I don't know why. I never saw anything in my experience in the government in 37 years, both as an intelligence professional, but also as a senior military individual. I never saw anything that led me to believe that there was some external, i.e. non-terrestrial actor behind this kind of activity. But the flip side is I couldn't explain some of the activity. I just don't know.
But again, it's almost like that guy said it pretty clearly. I've seen no evidence that there's extraterrestrials or aliens or anything like that, but we have seen things we can't explain. It's unidentified. Maybe that's all this program was, just studying unidentified things. That doesn't mean aliens, right? It's like we can't call it unidentified and then we identify it. Unidentified anomalous phenomena, but we've identified it. Unidentified flying objects, but we've identified it. Unidentified aerial phenomena, but we've identified it. What? Non-human beings, non-human sentience, right? Extraterrestrials, interdimensional, this, that. We got all these names, ultra-terrestrial, right? Like, but we don't know what it is. But then what are you talking? Then why? What do you? If you don't know what it is, then why are you saying it's non-human? You should say we don't know what it is. Unidentified intelligence, right? Unidentified being. Like, again, it's just a play on words. It's just I don't know what the fuck's going on, man. Now, this next point that UFO Joe brings up about James Clapper is a good point and maybe something to consider.
A few years ago, he did an interview, I think it was on CNN, and I think he mentioned how he may have been part of the problem of why more people don't know about this. I don't know if he was referring to what you just said, but yeah, he was out there. But that was one of his few interviews. I think it's the only interview he had given on UAP before the movie.
He should keep repenting then, because it's really good to hear. And George, he specifically mentioned that they were seeing UFOs over the test site, over Area 51. So he's not talking about our black projects. Just think about that for a second, right? Everybody, he's not talking about our black projects. He's talking about some foreign technology, something that's not ours, UFOs over Area 51. Can you imagine, George, why there might be UFOs over Area 51?
Must be secret programs that planes were building or something. I read in the Wall Street Journal it was all made up. They made up the whole thing. They started that rumor because they had some fake UFO photos and everybody fell for it. So maybe Clapper is one of those who fell for it too.
And guess what, Joe? I found that CNN interview.
So next month, a government report is expected to be made public on the sightings of UFOs. As the former director of national intelligence, I think there have been a lot of theories about UFOs. What do you make of these revelations? What might this be? Have you seen any yourself? What do you make of this?
Well, first, I think it is kind of, there is logic to the intelligence community addressing this, since the intelligence community has a lot of practice of dealing with ambiguity and less than complete facts. And secondly, I think it's really important that whenever we witness such phenomenon, that it is recorded and documented for the future. When we may gather more information and have a better understanding of what's transpiring. Could there be life out there? Sure. As huge as the universe is, we really can't reject that possibility. So I think this is a good thing. The transparency, I expect this report will be filled with ambiguity as well. And people, depending on their leanings, will extract what they want out of this report.
How it always goes, right? Where there is ambiguity, people can pull what they want from it. But it does sound like it is, something that we haven't seen before, this type of transparency around this topic.
Yes, and I'm not sure why that is. The only reason to me, for classification would be if there's some sensitive method that data relating to so-called UFOs was collected. But other than that, I don't know why we haven't been more transparent about it in the past, and I'm part of that crime, I guess. And my former capacities were, I didn't insist on more transparency with respect to this issue.
Now, this next part that George Knapp brings up, I was not expected to hear. But it may explain a little bit more of that end part of that CNN interview.
Let me add a little other element here. James Clapper is no friend of UFO research. When OSAP was trying to become a special access program, what's not been made public is he fought tooth and nail to kill it. He was whispering to, I think Ashton Carter at the time was the Secretary of Defense, and of course it did get killed, but he was adamant about this is useless, worthless, no value here, kill it, and it was killed. But I don't think that's ever come out before, as far as I can recall. But it's interesting now he's out on the forefront of spilling the beans.
So it sounds like James Clapper was never a friend of UFOs, but then all of a sudden he is. Is he just, feels bad about it now? Or is this just a new way to cover things up? Again, pretend like you become part of the solution when you're really part of the problem. Because clearly there's a precedent for him being part of the problem. I mean, he readily admits it, and George Knapp reveals this never before heard public admission, right? And James Clapper seemed to be involved with this stuff. Why didn't he want that to happen with OSAP back in the day? He thought it was bullshit, and now he doesn't? Something's not adding up. And look, even Chris Mellon gets involved on this. He released a video with the Disclosure Fund, I think it's called, this program or something, or company or something, I don't even know what it is that he's involved with. They keep changing their names. I don't know what's going on. He brings up the James Clapper stuff, and I admit it's kind of interesting.
Just today, Chris Mellon, he had a video put out in the I think it was the Disclosure Foundation, and he was calling for people to testify under oath to the Congressional Armed Services and Intel committees. 4 different high-level people, or 3 different people from the Air Force. One person who's Don Merricks, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, the Deputy Director for Science and Technology at the CIA. So to me, if this film is going to count, then it really has to be actionable. So Congress should be inspired to do something, subpoena people, do what public citizens cannot do. You have all the momentum now that this film came out, so do something actionable. That's what I think about it.
Now, look, let's take a look at a little highlight from that video that Chris Mellon put out. I'm going to put a link in the description to the full video so you can put it out. And look, I have to admit, he does make some interesting points about the Air Force. I don't know.
My name is Chris Mellon. I spent approximately 20 years in the U.S. intelligence community, both in the Defense Department and on Capitol Hill, with the Senate Intelligence Committee. The other day, I had the opportunity to see the new UAP documentary, Age of Disclosure. And after reflecting on it, I prepared a few remarks that I hope will be of assistance to Congress. In the new UAP documentary, Age of Disclosure, we learned that the Air Force had a secret program to track UAP in the vicinity of Area 51 and other sensitive military facilities in the 1990s. This report comes from none other than General James Clapper, former Director of U.S. Air Force Intelligence and former Director of National Intelligence. Does that secret Air Force UAP program continue to this day? Where is the data? What did the Air Force learn? Why is it that Air Force F-22s, despite having greatly superior sensors, did not report UAP operating in DoD training areas off the East Coast when Navy F-18s were routinely detecting and reporting UAP on the same ranges? Why is it the USS Princeton radar data from the Nimitz case disappeared after U.S. Air Force officers visited the ship? In fact, there are many similar cases where Navy data was removed by U.S. Air Force personnel. Why is it the Air Force never reports UAP detected by its strategic radar systems? It is time for Congress to put the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force, the Secretary of the Air Force, and the Director of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations under oath in a secure hearing room to get to the bottom line.
Again, I just don't know what's going on. You know, when we say there's a UFO program, we just immediately go, the whole alien program. But then they don't call it that. And if it was, you know, it's like we can't use the word unidentified, because as soon as you say unidentified in the UFO community, people are like, it's aliens. But wait, again, to me, there's UFO, the acronym, and then there's UFO, the word. And I think when people use UFO, the word, they mean aliens. But there's also an acronym, unidentified flying object. And we don't know which one people are using when they use it. But I will admit, there's some interesting things about the Air Force there that Chris Mellon brought up. So I don't know. All right, now this last part of the interview that I'm going to cover, again, link in the description to go watch the full Weaponized podcast. There's so much more that I didn't cover, and I highly recommend checking it out. It was a great conversation. I have to admit, the whole panel, everyone had really great points, and I really enjoyed listening to it. So shout out to all those guys. Now, this next part is very interesting because Jeremy is going to bring up a point about the UFO community that has always stumped me.
George, remember this James Fox? He was, going out on a limb to make a documentary about a being. I remember him, he was really scared about it. It's going to kill my credibility in the UFO world as a filmmaker, and we're all, do it. But even as a filmmaker, documentarian on this, James Fox was having those heart palpitations. He's going to start getting into beings, into aliens, and now we're in a different place where we're having these conversations about creatures, about pilots, and we'll get into that a little bit later today, but it's kind of neat how we're now facing it. We're getting past the stigma, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if it's stigma. I think it's stigma, but it's also, I always wonder, why did these people, I felt like whatever it was, they felt like maybe they would get in trouble talking about certain things.
Oh yeah, biologics being off the table for a lot of people, and also just not a lot of people are exposed to that within these programs. It's a very small thing.
Yeah, it felt
it's like the history of UFO world. For so long, people were willing, ufologist types and UFO organizations were willing to agree these craft in the sky are coming from somewhere else. But don't tell me they're flown by somebody else, some aliens or something. We don't want to hear that stuff. And abductions, that was a verboten topic for a long time at a MUFON conference or something like that. That's just crazy talk. So now when you want to follow the evidence where it leads, that exposure to these craft and beings really do happen, that people get sick, serious injuries are caused by it, and that they start seeing werewolves and stuff, I can understand people not being willing to talk about it. Even the folks who were at Skinwalker, they kept some of that wrapped up for a long time, as crazy as it sounds.
I've always found that kind of funny that there's certain limits you can go to with this community, right? Like an example I always give, I just find hilarious, is like people will be like, remote viewing, that's such bullshit, man. How can you talk about remote viewing? You idiot. So anyway, interdimensional time traveling aliens. Wait, what? That's okay to bring it? Like, we're all under the umbrella of crazy here. I don't know. There is no line to me. Like, what are you talking? Like, we can talk about UFOs, but not if there's some piloting. I mean, that's stupid. What are we talking about? All the claims are crazy, but it is an interesting point. Like, let's say people that claim to have been taken by aliens, right? That's definitely something very interesting that I do think is, you know, worth talking about. And I think there are some interesting points about why maybe some of these points don't get brought up, right? Even if you think it's crazy or not, but something like people that have been taken, right? Some of them come to the conclusions they have for maybe not the right reasons. Joe Rogan recently talked about this on a recent episode, and I found what he said and his guests to be rather interesting.
Like that you can lead someone to believe something happened that didn't happen.
Yeah, this is what Jolly West was, some of the stuff that he was
this
doing.
This is what's really, do you know who John Mack is?
John Mack.
John Mack was, I believe he was a psychiatrist at Harvard. He got really obsessed with alien abduction stories.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a book called Abduction, and it was all hypnotic regressions of people that had been abducted by aliens, allegedly.
Mm-hmm.
And they all had very similar stories.
Mm-hmm.
But the real controversy from skeptics has always been, like, what were these sessions like? Did you
leading questions?
Yes, yes. Did you lead them to believe what? And also, there was a precedent. So do you know the Betty and Barney Hill story?
Mm-mm.
Okay, Betty and Barney Hill were an interracial couple in New Hampshire, I believe, in the 1950s, were the very first UFO abduction story. And they had an experience on a highway. They saw a thing. They lost time, and then they couldn't sleep. They had all these real problems, and they both wound up going to a hypnotist. And separately had the same story. Separately had the same story about being taken aboard a craft and being manipulated. All these. The problem is then that story gets out into the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Right? And then you have hypnotic regression where people tell very similar versions of that story. And it becomes a thing where, like, even if the original Betty and Barney Hill story was real, now that becomes a possibility in your mind that could have happened to you. And then you get hypnotized and someone says, do you see any beings in the room with you? Yes, I do. Are they short with large heads and large black eyes? They are. Like, what are the questions? Like, how did you lead them into this hypnotic regression of alien abduction?
And I think a very similar thing took place during the European kind of witch craze in the 17th century.
Yes.
These preachers would go around to different communities talking about witches and demons. And so as soon as they left, in the weeks following, there's a huge uptick in witch accusations and supposed demonic possessions. It's like, is it a coincidence that right after as soon as it's brought to your consciousness, oh, I think you might be a witch, or all these accusations start spreading around. Obviously, it's like a suggested thing that they picked up from attending these religious rallies.
Of course.
Yeah, there's always been an issue with hypnosis and, you know, trying to get people's memory back, right, through hypnosis, right? Because they do get led to believe certain things. I've seen it myself. I've seen clips of it, right? And I'm not saying none of those stories are true. I'm just saying I think a lot of people have been led to believe they've been taken by aliens when they haven't at all. How does that help, right? How does that help? And people can be susceptible to this. And anyone that doesn't admit that is just crazy. No, not me. My story's real. Okay. Well, any proof or evidence? No, I know what I saw. All right. Well, guess it's just for you then. Don't expect other people to believe it if you don't have anything to prove it. Sorry. What are we supposed to do here? We can't let emotions rule us here, right? Not saying we shouldn't feel emotions because we're not robots, but we have to put the standard of evidence and proof at the very top. If this is the greatest discovery in the history of mankind, then it should be the greatest evidence or proof in the history of mankind. At least that's my opinion. Because look, people do go out of the way to deceive. But like that point that I brought up before, if you put out an ad for your band and you don't rehearse, it's not going to end well.
Interesting. Well, the real problem was when someone pretends and you catch them pretending like that, then you're never going to trust them again. You could fail. You can fail and fuck up. You could think you got it right and you got it wrong and you just, oh, fuck. But if you pretend, if you lie, if you show deception, if you pretend you're something that you're not, and they find out, like Ellen, you know, she's a nice lady, she's all dancing, meanwhile she's fucking screaming at people and mean.
Yep.
You know, that's like, oh, you were lying.
Exactly. People come into the UFO community now that the door's been wide open, and people are going to come investigate more, and they start finding holes, and they're never coming back. Then we'll be worse off than when we started. So let me know your comments down below, y'all. Link in the description to the Weaponized episode, as well as to Rent Age of Disclosure if you want to check it out. And I really appreciate everyone tuning in. We'll see you guys on the next one. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.